Hello, everyone. I'm Glenda Rose, President of the Friends of the Office of State Archaeology. I'd like to welcome you today to the Archaeology of Connecticut. Today's program is on cemeteries and ancient burying grounds here in Connecticut. I've always been fascinated with old gravestones and the history they hold. In addition to the stories or mysteries of the residents, it is interesting to learn about the materials and the carvers. I'm sure you will all enjoy this show today, and the hour will go by really fast. Now I'd like to turn things over to Sarah Sportman.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to our June 22 episode of the Archaeology of Connecticut. So tonight we were joined by three special guests for our discussion of historic cemeteries, all three of which have got a lot of experience working in historic cemeteries in terms of preservation and education. They know a lot about the history of historic cemeteries, and I think we're going to have a really great conversation. So I thought just to start off, maybe we can have our guests introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about how they got interested in old cemeteries and got started doing their preservation work.
Okay, well, my name is Ruth Shapleigh-Brown, and I have been doing this for about 30-some years. And I started because back in the 80s, I got involved with my family association and our history up in Maine. And one of my cousins took me to visit one of our old family cemeteries. And I'll never forget the day as long as I live, because I was getting really bored listening to the conversation. And we pulled up on the side of the road, and there was this little hill and this little cemetery. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, God, now it's dead people. I had no idea how my life was going to change. I walked up that hill, looked at those old stones, and I particularly looked at one that had the name of Dependence Shapleigh, which I knew it was in the book. We had our family history written down, so I always assumed that Dependence would have been a female name, except that on the gravestone it said Captain Dependence. So I guess that told me something right there that I just didn't know very much, did I? And then I realized while I was kneeling there and brushing off the dirt that I was touching something that my ancestors 200 and some odd years before me had also touched, that they stood there and grieved the father and this husband. And here I am standing in exactly the same place that they stood. And I tell everybody it's my lightning bolt story. It's like I have never looked at things the same since. I looked around, saw it was a mess. Shortly after that, I became president of the association, and I'm like, this is disrespectful to my ancestors. We need to get together and figure out how to clean this up.
And Ruthie, so then that leads to the Connecticut Gravestone Network eventually?
Oh, yeah, it definitely did, because I got a bunch of us together. I then found out about the Association for Gravestone Studies and ventured there and started learning from my colleagues there, and my whole world just blossomed and changed completely. So from there, I then met Dr. Ballantoni. And with his support and his instruction and help, we ganged up and started doing some projects together. The word got out, more people got involved, and I started Connecticut Gravestone Network. And my motto is, it's a matter of respect.
And now, how long's Gravestone Network been around?
Since 82, I think I've done it. It's been almost 30 years I've been doing it.
And how many cemeteries do you think you or the network have touched and done work in or been involved with?
Well, I'd probably say myself. Some people think I've been all over the state and been to every cemetery, but I guarantee you I have not been to every cemetery, although sometimes it feels like it. When you talk to Michael and Lisa, they'll tell you they haven't found one yet that Ruthie hasn't been to, I think. But no, my idea of the network was to just have a voice for people to network, to work together, to share their experiences, and to support each other to help save and protect this history. Because Lord knows we've already lost so much of it.
Yeah, that's fair. Mike, tell us about what you've been up to.
Oh, it's just been a whirlwind. I'll give a brief history on myself, but, I'm I'm a spring chicken compared to other people that have been doing this for a long time, and so
He's calling me old again.
no, I'm not calling you old. Well seasoned is
Well
it?
seasoned.
Well seasoned.
Yes. But so I've been doing rediscovering history for 2 years now. It's not a COVID thing, meaning it's not a project bred out of COVID. You're looking for something to do. It's a passion. It's a way of life for me. When I was a kid, we didn't have video games. So you had to go outside from the time the sun came up to the time it went down, and you made your own adventures. My adventures led me to libraries, just reading and getting stuck into books and history. And then from there, just exploring and really building your own adventure. And then more recently, we were out looking at a cemetery in Norwich. And there was a Civil War grave on the outside of it, and I looked up the gentleman who was in charge of it, the caretaker, and he, within 5 minutes, said, "Why don't you come down to my house in Salem? I have a cemetery. It's overgrown." We went out there that day, and it was overgrown, probably 40, 50 feet worth of debris everywhere. This gentleman, 85, 86 years old, on his hands and knees crawling through it to try to see it. And the light bulb went off. I said, wait a minute. I love history anyways, having gone to National Archives and holding rare documents and, really enjoying that. I said, how can we help? How can we help take care of these cemeteries and, contact the town and everything else? And we got permission. And that was our very first one in October 2020. And then we got our nonprofit status through the state and then the IRS this year. And excuse me, it's just been absolutely crazy ever since. I mean, just going nonstop.
Now talk a little bit about all the different kind of things that your group is willing to do and does a very good job of for a lot of these cemeteries that are under stress.
So we started originally with, clearing debris and really being able to see it, rather than looking at it and not being able to touch anything, bringing it back to the present, in effect, keeping history alive. And so that was our initial, and we still do that. But now we also work on cleaning stones, resetting stones, if they have a single or double break. We don't get into stone restoration, meaning if it's completely gone, we don't recreate that stone. I'm not talented enough. I'll be the first to admit that. We do have people that we work with that will do it. We don't, but we do everything else, including locating stones, which is some weird speciality of mine. And now I can tell you just by going to a place where they are, and I found one today from 1732, which was amazing.
I've got to say, Rediscovering History is certainly an excellent title for what Michael wants to do, because we've been having fun. I've been working with him for almost a year now, I guess, on and off, and we've decided to partner up. We have a really good time, and everyone loves the passion that he has for things. But his excitement when he finds things, and we tease that when we go to visit some cemeteries, I'm like, I'm going to put handcuffs on you. You got to keep your hands out of the dirt, I'm
6'10" and a half, but my home is being in the dirt. I mean, today I have permission to work the I'm going to mispronounce it, but the ancient cemetery, I'll trim it that way, down in New London. And I've been working on cleaning stones there. And I do have permission to reset and to try to find other things. And I found one today, and I'm jumping around. I'm the only one here. Mind you, it's in New London, so they're thinking I'm really crazy. And I said, I got to tell Ruth. I said, I got to. I don't know what she's doing. I got to tell her. Took a picture of it and called her. I'm like, Ruth, hey. And I'm jumping up and down, this basket case I am. And I'm looking at the stone, and I wish she was there. That's how much respect I have for her, that she's the first person I got to tell this to.
And people that know me know I'm not a real social media person whatsoever. But I have to say, since I've been working with Mike and Lisa, it is something I can be home doing my own work. I get a phone call from them. The next thing you know, I'm on the computer, and it's almost as if I was there. And in some cases, I've told them, well, if you go over to the left and you walk another 30 feet, then you're going to find this. Then you're going to find. So it's really increased the interest that we have to try to be in many places and do this work. Yeah.
My personal feeling is, looking from the outside, it's been a very symbiotic relationship where the two different organizations are more than the sum of the two separate parts.
And we're not discovering the past. It's already there. So that was the whole premise. When I was thinking of a name to do something, I said, it's about rediscovering. And I said, rediscovering history. And I'm like, wow, that kind of works. And I said, but that's what it is. We're bringing that past back to the present. And then you can put your hand, I'm a hopeless romantic. You can put your hands on something like Ruthie did. And you can feel it come alive. And then when you have that stone and you stand it back up and you look at that person, even though their body is probably gone, but their essence is in that stone, you tell them they still exist.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what a great feeling.
I can verify the rediscovering part, having walked through some woods for quite a ways to find a very small, like 4-grave cemetery.
Actually, it's about 6, but okay, yeah.
Definitely. Well, one thing, just to let people know that if this is a new topic to them, for years what I've done is try to do have symposiums at least once or twice a year. Unfortunately, it's gone kind of quiet with COVID because I really need space to have a room for 120 to 150 people that turn out. Just a little difficult to do that now. We are starting to put some programs together and deal with some things in the future. And I think the energy that I've been getting working with Mike and Lisa has helped me know that it's worthwhile. Plus, the only good thing that I can see that has come out of COVID is that a lot of people that have been home and bored have taken this opportunity to explore their local history, which is excellent. But it has brought all of us that are in this business just so much attention because so many people are reaching out. How do I, can I, if I can? It's unbelievable the energy it's brought. Yeah.
Well, let's get into it then a little bit. So, right, everybody has driven by a cemetery. Some are near churches, some aren't near churches. Some that Mike seems to always find are in the middle of the woods all by themselves. What are the different types of burial places that we have here in Connecticut? And maybe are they different? Is there a little bit of a history for the different types? Or
well, what I try to explain to people, and no, I am not the leading expert, but with all that I have absorbed over the years and research that I've done, I love my old books. That if you are learning about carvers or you're learning about old burying grounds, there are some basic things that I always try to teach my groups to understand. First of all, we're not Massachusetts, we're not Rhode Island. Those cities were colonized and found earlier than Connecticut. They had available carvers to use and to do that kind of work earlier than we did. So you come to the Connecticut colony, having a roof over your head and food on your table is a lot more important than having a gravestone. Plus, it cost money. The only thing that it would cost is that someone would have to be paid to dig the grave. So you lived, you died, you were buried. End of story. Now, to clarify that just a little bit better, again, for the first couple of generations in general, I tell people, having available fancy carved gravestones is a hit and miss thing. Nick and I had decided a long time ago that probably with your old burying grounds, and let me just clarify that technically, although we use the terms intermittent, an old burying ground is pre-1800. A cemetery is post-1800. A cemetery is a business. You're buying a plot and planning things ahead of time. Totally different world, totally different outfit. Many old burying grounds have become cemeteries, so that's a whole nother chapter to talk about. So in the earliest times, people were buried, just end of story. Within 3 days, they were buried wherever it was convenient, a lot of times on their own land. Sicknesses would make differences. If graves were marked at all, they might have been used with local field stones, which were not carved always with dates and not fancy. When you get towards the end of the 1800s, when people decided to clean up some of these older places, those stones were totally ignored. and done away with. Just like footstones, and always in Puritan times, you had a headstone, you had a footstone. It was important to mark the length of the grave. Feet would be to the east because when Gabriel blows that horn, you're to rise and go forward, not backwards. So feet would have to be to the east for you to do that.
But the British would be backwards, right?
Well, they would do that as a punishment, and I always tease everybody when I do my tours that I am not clear what the punishment was for Tories to be buried in reverse, except by the time they got up, dusted themselves off, and turned around, they were last in line.
Yeah, there you go.
So that's a basic understanding of the differences in the two. We have already erased so much history, and like I said, Dr. Ballantoni agrees with me. If you're talking early burying grounds, probably 2/3 of the people buried there did not have gravestones. So your boundaries and fences and stone walls that were put up were probably put up, number one, to keep the lawnmowers in, of course. And number two, they would probably only be put around an area to protect existing stones. So they're not truly, as people would think today, the boundary of the exact burying ground. Okay? I think that's my basic how to look at things. Please think about it. Okay.
So I'm going to throw another one out there. So, right, we think of a cemetery today, right? You go in, they show you the map, and they got little square boxes all across it where which ones you're going to pick, and they have a big book with everyone's names and dates, and they have all this material, and they meticulously are keeping records, and the stones are all in these nice straight lines, and that's the way it's always been, right?
No, of course not.
I knew the answer to that, so I said yeah.
So an old burying ground, basically people would be, and again, I'm talking pre-1800, people would be buried as they died. They might leave space for a husband, a wife, a child, but pretty much it's a generation at a time, perhaps 2 generations. But if you're going into something which 80% of our old cemeteries are like this, where you've got 15 Smiths in a row and the dates go from 17-something to 1890. The stones have been realigned, and that really, in so many cases, that has happened over and over and over again. So the stones do not line up with actual graves. I do find that a good percentage of the time to be the issue. And people takes things for granted way too easy. It's like one of the worst complaints I've gotten this year, because again, I don't do social media, is there is a governor, a hero, a revolutionary governor out there, and his stone's been broken for years and nobody has fixed it. That town is terrible. These people that are saying this on social media couldn't be more wrong, and they need to learn what they're talking about. The monument they're talking about happens to be a monument with a column made on the top of it, and that column is broken in half. And the idea is it's a later symbolism, it's not an early Puritan one, that tells you that this person was a pillar of the community whose life was cut short. So all this sarcasm about not fixing things is a little out of place, and people need to learn.
So that brings up an interesting point, the symbolism in cemeteries. You know, I think that anybody who's walked around in a really old cemetery has seen the winged skulls, and then we have the symbolism that changes. You could see, can you, Mike, and can you guys take us through some of what some of those symbols meant and the time frames that they were popular and part of the burial culture and the burial practices?
So like today, that stone that I found from 1732 had a death's head on it. And those are different variations, but the same principle on them. But those are an earlier style. I know some of them had a skull and crossbones. Depending on where you are. Up in Massachusetts, you might see a full coffin or maybe an actual skeleton portrayed on them. But then as you started getting away from that, you look at the weeping willow, you have the urn on there, you have fingers pointing up or fingers pointing down. You might have flowers that aren't bloomed, or maybe they have one leaf on them, and all those Ruthie knows the exact intricacies on those, but all those have specific meanings to the particular person. So it's not like that one symbol means the same thing across the board. You have to look at the stone and the symbolism to put the two together. But then you also see like children, especially infants and babies, where people will say, "Oh, these small stones, these must be children." Well, those are footstones. They're not children; they're footstones. But on some children's stones, you will see a little lamb on top. You'll see different things, and that's going to tell you that that's an infant on there. But then you have the symbolism with the different leaves and the flowers not in bloomed. Maybe it's a young girl; she didn't hit the proper age. So many different things.
Right. There's your Puritanism people did not believe in having, some of them didn't believe in having gravestones at all, never mind any iconography on them, so it just wouldn't exist. So your earliest stones are plain looking stones, not that they were cheaper stones, they were just plain. Then you get into skulls. Now, again, like I tried to reference before, because we didn't have that many carvers in Connecticut, we had well, how do I say this? We do have skulls in Connecticut, but they came from Boston and they came from Rhode Island, and most of the time they would be slate stones. Right. Okay, and those would all be imported. And what I try to teach people there is, it's, to me, I call it like a reverse genealogy, because if I can identify the carver, then I can turn around and tell you where to go find family. For instance, good example, in East Lyme, I was there with a historian. We found a gravestone, and I told her, I said, "Oh, that's different being here. It was cut by a New Hampshire carver." She went and looked up the information, and she found out that the entire family moved from East Lyme to New Hampshire, except this one brother. So obviously, when he died, the family had someone they knew carve the stone, and they brought the stone down to the grave. So that's my big genealogy feature. So we don't have a lot of skulls that I have found carved in Connecticut. We have some similar ones. So the three basic things you're going to see in the early iconography, whether it's a cherub, again, I don't see what we call angels. To me, that belongs in Rhode Island and Boston. But it's a face, which is, obviously represents the soul of the person. Wings, that hopefully the soul is flying to heaven and rising. And then usually you get some kind of a crown or like a halo or whatever on the top of the head. And that is representing the crown of righteousness, which means if you were a good Christian, of course your way to heaven has been paved.
So the earliest ones, we see these Puritans, and, I've read some of them. And it's like, here lies the body of so-and-so rotting. I mean, it's a very bleak kind of a...
It's written in Old English,
too. So, I mean, you could see a philosophy there that is really harsh, and I think their mindset is very harsh.
It was the religious set, because you had to be a good Christian. Everything depended on being that good Christian. Everything depended on rising and going forth that day. We have one lady out in Lebanon, supposedly, that rising and going forth went so much to her that she actually requested to be buried standing up.
That's great.
Seriously. So, but then as you get down into the 1800s and especially towards Victorian times, things change. So in the beginning, it's like you had to be a good Christian so you could get to heaven. Then it starts to be, oh, we're sad because we lost you. And by the time you get to Victorian times, we're really not mourning the person that died, because they've gone on to a better place. We're now mourning because we have been left here on earth without them. And we are the focus that have been left behind more than the person that died.
And that's what, like Mike was saying, that's what some of the flowers that are wilting and
that's the change in the iconography. Yeah. Yep.
And now you can go to a cemetery and see a new stone with your guy's favorite NASCAR or sports team on it.
Right.
And pictures.
And those are all polished, I mean, when you go to a burying ground and a cemetery, especially a burying ground, you see these stones and they're in such bad shape, whether it's the lichen, the moss, the biological growth. You're really not going to see that on your newer stones because they have that polished front where it doesn't adhere as bad, where your marble, your sandstone, your slate really starts to, get bad. And that's where we've been working on cleaning and trying to reverse that. Not so much to just keep it clean, but it helps with genealogy. There's, especially like Ruthie said, people are getting out. They're learning more about themselves, their community. And so the more that we clean stones and we stand them up and get them out of the ground, we share that information with people. You never know. You might have a descendant call you up and say, "Oh my God, that's my third great grandfather. Thank you so much. I didn't know about it." I mean, that means the world right there.
Well, you bring up an interesting topic, Mike. Materials. So, look, can we talk a little bit about the change in materials that we see being used for gravestones here in Connecticut from earliest times? I think Ruthie mentioned field stones at the beginning.
Yeah, it's, again, you have to think of the practical time. I tease and say Yankee thrift. I mean, that's what you have to focus on. You're going to use something that's local, easy to get your hands on. Sandstone up and down the river, of course, was the most popular stone because it was easy to carve, easy to work, and there was plenty of it to be found. So don't forget you're carving by hand, so as to how you can actually work it makes a big difference in what you're doing. Once the Portland quarry opened up, then things got even busier and things started to extend in bigger and bigger circles. So by then, like I said, 1740, so you've got second generation carvers that are now in business and more competition, more things going on. So everything's changing. You're getting more and more stones with more and more designs, more and more issues. What I do ask people to remember, though, is, again, you died and you were usually buried within 3 days. I try to teach young kids, it's not like you pick up the phone and order a gravestone. You have to stop and think of the times. You had to find someone. You had to be able to afford to pay that person. You had to make communication go back and forth as to what you wanted on that stone. Do you also have to consider the seasons and the times, because even your carvers were doing other mason work. They were also feeding a family. They were also taking care of things in good weather. So they spent a lot of their time in the winter carving their stones when they couldn't be farming and doing everything else. Stones, again, couldn't be delivered in the winter time, so that's a whole 4 or 5 months that maybe things don't get done. They can't be set until the ground thaws. So right there, to place the order, to make the order, to set the stone, you're talking 3 to 4 years. Many cases, the families would wait until they could afford such things. Like if you see a child stone and it's 3 children, but the dates are maybe 8 and 10 years apart, that's because the parents knew where they were buried. And as life went on and things got a little easier, they could afford or find a carver and they could have their children's graves memorialized that way. So everybody would be put on one stone. So that gravestone isn't arriving until sometimes up to 20 some years afterwards. And frequently I find that a lot more than people realize.
Yeah, and so what are the problems from these materials? I mean, I've been in cemeteries and I kind of know that slate and brownstone, depending on weather conditions and the quality of the material to begin with, are really problematic.
And slates really aren't that problematic. I mean, yeah, sure they are in some aspect, not as bad as sandstone. Slate, unfortunately, when it breaks, it shatters. I mean, and it's almost impossible to put back together, if at all. But those sandstones, and it's really weird. I've never fully understood it. You have so many brownstone buildings in New York and so forth, and they're still standing, and they're looking phenomenal.
Quickly, that's because they're only exposed to the environment on one side. Look at your little stones. They're exposed from the bottom all the way around.
Yeah, true. But even still, you're not getting those cracks. It is a porous stone. You're not getting those cracks where on the gravestones, they do delaminate quite bad. And once that happens, it's very tough. And so even when we go to clean a stone, we don't just run up to a stone and start cleaning it. I will usually tap on it to feel and to hear the sounds, and I listen to the resonance, and it'll tell me, hey, this spot is hollow, this isn't, and you look for those cracks as well. And if you feel any of that, you don't touch it. Right. Or certainly you don't touch that area, because one of the biggest things is do no harm. So where the elements, unfortunately, are going to do their thing to these stones, I don't want to do any more damage than what nature's already going to do.
Right, exactly. So, so when I go to the cemetery next time and visit my great grandpa, and I want to clean the stone, is that okay to do? Should I not do that?
No, it's all right. It's your grandfather.
Yeah.
So
The family owns the stone.
But what are the do's and don'ts, I guess, is the real
all right.
question.
Well, laws, you'll have to come to one of our meetings and do laws are just really a problem. And unfortunately, I've gotten more involved in this than I ever want to. But it is the family's property. However, within the family, you can have an argument
Sure.
as to who said what and whatever. But basically, I just teach people a simple basic thing. If you, again, take the precautions, like Michael said, if it's an old stone. But there's a lot that can be done with just simple water cleaning. Just basic water, the more the better. And I teach people in my workshops to use wooden popsicle sticks or plastic scrapers, but I never ever use metal, especially
And
if
a
you're only
soft bristle brush,
and
too.
soft bristle brushes, right?
That's it.
I
That's
tell
all you
people
need.
on email, if it hurts, if you're new at this and it hurts your skin, then don't use it on the gravestone.
And I tell people when they're cleaning the cemeteries, they're quick to grab that stupid weed whacker. And just like when they're cleaning a stone, they'll grab a pressure washer. And both
Oh,
things
no,
I
no.
highly am against. But when they use a weed whacker, someone did it the other day. And I said, why don't you turn that around? It has the plastic guard on it. And he's like, but if I do that, then it's going to kick back and hit me. I said, so imagine what it's doing to that stone right now.
Oh, good line.
That is pretty good.
And so he didn't do it, but I said, it's easy enough to hand trim around it. I know it might take a little extra time, but the more the rocks hit it, it gets that Mae West effect, where it has that skinny waist. And then once it gets it, it breaks. You know what I'm talking about over there.
Ever heard of that one? Okay.
Yeah. See? There you go. I'm teaching you new things, Ruthie.
Yeah, right.
Just don't Google it,
I didn't think Mae West was that skinny, but whatever.
So then again, we just want to use clean water, plenty of it. We want to use plastic implements or wooden implements, no metal, and we want to be gentle with it, obviously.
Yeah.
And we want to avoid those really old ones that might have some kind of
damage to them.
Yeah, the old ones definitely. I mean, if most people that I meet now are, their concerns are with things that are 1900 and older. Now, the different types of marble, which are the white stones, that sometimes they're dirty and they're looking gray, and people don't recognize that they really are a white stone. That's a little different to deal with, but still, just water will make a bit of a difference. There are other cleaners, but I prefer people come to a workshop or learn about them before they use them. So you can do that. Granite stones are pretty safe. You can't really hurt them. Granite's pretty tough. They're all machine cut. They're not hand done. So you should be pretty safe to work on them without too much
Yeah, and you don't need on a polished granite. You don't need any biological cleaner on it. It's just going to run right off.
Right.
It's like putting something on your car and just rinsing it off. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to soak in because that polished part is actually sealed. So nothing's going to get right into that. Where the sides of it, maybe it might soak in, but not as much as a sandstone or a marble.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
That's great information.
That's true. Yeah, the older stones are a lot more porous in how they degrade. It makes a difference on the acidity in the soil and everything around them, and the acid rain too.
But even like a marble stone, you could clean it, but you don't need to clean a stone every single day and every single month and every single year. The more you do it, the more it's going to hurt the stone. And especially with a marble, you'll see something called sugaring, to where you can rub your hand on it and it starts to come off. Don't touch that stone. It's already at that point where just let it breathe, let it relax. And even when I'm cleaning them, it may not be the best results immediately, and that's fine. But then I'll let the stone rest. You don't want to do so much stress on it, and people don't realize, they're rocks. They don't feel anything. But they're actually breathing in water. They're releasing water, and you want it just to not stress it out.
Sarah, well, why don't we take a minute? Can you talk a little bit about how graves, whether they're marked or unmarked, are protected by state law?
Yeah, we do have unmarked burial laws here in Connecticut that protect ancient burial grounds, and people are not allowed to knowingly disturb the resting places of people. Knowing, of course, is the key aspect to that there. But, lots of times, and this is where this all intersects with archaeology, right, is some of the discussions that we've had already about graves not being marked or about stones being lost. Some of the ones that Michael's found have been, they've fallen onto the ground and gotten covered over with soil and buried. So lots of times graves aren't marked necessarily in a way that's visible, and they get disturbed that way. And that's when the archaeology really kind of intersects with this whole topic, when we get called out to some of those situations where graves have been disturbed, either through construction practices or gravel mining or just, farming. Any of those types of things can disturb graves, but they are technically protected if they're known.
And that does include indigenous burials. I want to make clear. So native, pre-contact burials.
They have their own law, their own protection.
Yeah, they have special protection under the law.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that we kind of covered that too.
Yeah, well, the problem is that we have a law, but people aren't aware of it and they don't use it. And
it's rarely enforced, I think, is the other thing.
Yeah, it's really hard because for all the complaints about this topic that I've gotten in the last several years, the only people we have to go to are Sarah and SHPO office. And they are overwhelmed. SHPO office and I talk all the time. They're very overwhelmed with these things too. You have a lot of cemeteries that are reusing old space. And I mean quite a few. There's more out there than anybody realizes. Because nobody complains. Nobody says anything. People aren't curious. I don't know why it's not obvious to more people. If it's okay with you, then so be it. But to most of us, it's not okay. And again, it's because of boundary changes. The law has never been changed for an ancient burying ground is protected. An ancient burying ground in the law is anything that's 100 years old. Now, to my knowledge, it has not been changed yet. And if you think of any cemetery that has burials that are over 100 years old, we're talking about an awful lot of burying ground cemeteries. So trying to get attention for this is difficult. One of the worst case scenarios, if anyone hesitates to what I'm saying, Google Park Street Cemetery in Bridgeport. You will still get all kinds of stories. I have some very good friends that are still trying to fix the matter. It was a private cemetery, therefore the local police couldn't do anything about it, nor could the state police do anything about it, even when I found bones all over the ground and took them to them. So
yeah, that was a difficult
it really is. I mean, Sarah came in, everybody came in, and all my archaeology friends here, they heard me complain about it, but when they finally got down there, when the police and the detectives were there and saw it, they were in shock. They could not believe it. So if that person was allowed to deal with digging up for 12 years old sections of the cemetery in order to sell the land for new burials, it is happening in more places than people realize, and we need to start paying attention. And I'll shut up after this, but my first thought is to always, I'm trying so hard that I think we should have a state oversight committee, some place that we can all go to with these kind of concerns and complaints and get some legal help to figure out how to fix these things. The laws are inconsistent all over the place, and it's a nightmare trying to figure it all out. So I'll be quiet now.
I want to get to something. It's a different topic, but I want to get to something that a listener sent in through our Instagram post. They're asking, how do I learn more about the stone? My ancestors are resting in the Bethel Stony Hill 1793 cemetery. I'd love to know more. I can barely read the headstones. What's the first point of exploration or rediscovery for family members?
One of the biggest things, if you know where it is, we always document through pictures before, during, and after any of our work, and that just shows the processes that we go through. One of the things that Ruthie will attest to, she takes a full-size mirror, and you can reflect the light onto the mirror and then shine it onto the stone, and it essentially makes it pop, and you're not doing a rubbing, you're not damaging the stone, you're not putting any pressure on that stone. If it's dirty and so forth, that's where you'd have to look into having it clean. Then you can use that mirror, but the cleaning should start to bring it out as well.
Yeah, that raking light from the side surprisingly really does make a huge difference in trying to read
It
those
does. That
stones.
surprises a lot of people.
Yeah. The other thing I suggest is, if they were buried before 1930s, when the Hale collection is put together, there are transcriptions on a lot of the stones that were inventoried in the Hale collection. It was a big project that was started, and it was furthered by a lot of the Work Progress Association during the Depression. And I believe it's online, available for free from the Connecticut State Library.
Yeah, through Ancestry, I think that they used it. What Hale did was collect records from various towns. And I used to work at the State Library, and I love doing the research. And what I've done is try to collect the parts that he has collected that are in the archives that are from the people from those locales. So if, depending on how far I've gotten with my collection, I have a lot of information on a lot of places that some people don't have access to that I can get very easily, because the State Library right now has got shortened hours and not easy for everyone to get to Hartford. But the Hale collection is a good overall review to get to, and it is available on Ancestry. Most of you that are asking me these questions should be checking first maybe with your local historical societies. Not all local historical societies get involved with their old cemeteries, but most of them will know if someone in town is or has in the past. So you need to kind of start with there. My email's pretty backed up these days after it got hacked, and now I'm only using one email address, but I'd be glad to help people that have serious concerns. You just have to be patient getting me to answer you. So,
Hey, I want to see if it's, I'm sorry, Sarah, if we're kind of hijacking things, but this is crazy. We've been on the air for 7 years. We're committed to preserving stories, telling stories, and celebrating our collective arc. I want to ask our experts here around the round table, and also our friends from FOSA, and for you, Sarah. But can you share with us whether it is a famous person or just a person, a forgotten person? If you can share a story, tell us a story that resonated with you. We've covered, we go back to Lady Fenwick's marker and the great stories there, and some of it fact, some of it fiction, and we even had some real-time discovery with members of the Griswold family, and this is a topic that connects with us. We're currently with Professor Stephen Gencarella from UMass Amherst talking about the Leatherman, and of course, Nick Bellantoni is attached to that.
Going to find his grave, actually.
So can you guys, and we'll start here around the round table, but open it to everybody. Give us a story.
I'll go first.
go.
So one of the things that we've done with the Friends Group in conjunction with the Office of State Archaeology and the National Resource Conservation Service is we occasionally are able to provide ground-penetrating radar surveys in cemeteries. And I thought one of the most interesting for me was a Middletown cemetery. They had this big open area kind of right in the middle of the cemetery, which, and the caretaker thought that was just kind of an odd place for there to be, it was like prime real estate. Why wouldn't there be somebody there? And we went down and we did some GPR, and he had done a little bit of research, and he had an idea what would be there, and he was absolutely right. What we found was a number of graves really packed together. Some of them probably contained more than one individual, and what we had found was the influenza, the Spanish flu victims that were buried. And they are subsequent to that, I believe, put up a special marker, a monument to remember them. But they were all buried very hastily in conditions that weren't very good. And if you look at the newspaper articles from Middletown at the time, there's discussion that the bodies are being brought out and left on the street because people are scared, right? You can't keep these people in your house. People are scared they're going to get the flu and die. So it's a real problem, and these people weren't remembered the same way most of those people that are getting buried in that day and age are, with a family plot and a family stone. So I thought that was a really kind of touching connection to really a not too distant past. That's 100 years ago.
Yeah. I remember when I was working at the state library, because I couldn't be with Nick and the group that day, and they were down in New Haven because we'd had a storm and a tree fell over on the green. And one of my colleagues stopped me that afternoon, and she said, "Oh my God, did you hear about what happened in New Haven?" I said, "What?" She goes, "They found a body." And I said, "Yeah." I said, "Under the tree roots on the." I said, "Yeah." She says, "Well, listen." I said, "No, it's not." And I think we ended up with 2 or 3 bodies, actually.
At least 3
Yeah.
individuals. I want to say 5 altogether, but I could be wrong.
And it's like people just don't realize the New Haven Green is where the first burying ground was. The stones were all removed, but not the bodies. The same thing with the Guilford Green when they have all their parties. And I meet these
That's
people
true.
that go, "I won't come in the cemetery because I don't want to walk on dead people." Well, don't go to the greens then in the towns, because guess what? Again, stones were removed, but the bodies weren't. Oh.
And going back before I even started rediscovering history, I have been researching for many years now. And you're speaking of legends, and you talk about Maud's grave over in Voluntown, and I had Sarah and Scott come out. I don't know if I brought you out there before, Ruthie.
I don't think so.
And that one took about 7 years for me to find. And it ended up with me finding a hand-drawn map from the uncle. This was just a little girl who died of diphtheria. She had a swollen throat. She was about 2 going on 3. And unfortunately, where she was buried was being targeted by vandals, all these crazy people, kids with nothing better else to do. And her uncle, before he passed, had put up a sign on her grave, which I thankfully have a picture of. "How dare you, attack this grave, and curse you that do this." Well, of course, it's the old telephone game, and before you know it, she's a witch. And over in Voluntown, on a different part of Voluntown, Cedar Swamp Road, there is an old homestead out in the woods, and there's a small little squared-in area. And for years, including one of my close personal friends, Tom DiAgostino, wrote a book about different legends. He's up in Putnam, and he did mention this. And he took a picture of a gravestone, and it said, "Maud Reynolds, 1600s, because she's a witch, so you got to put her back in that time period." And then one day that stone was gone, and no one realized what happened to it. Where did it even come from? If you looked at the stone in the picture, it was concrete. The Boy Scouts had set it up as a hoax back in the 1980s. And all these people, "Oh, it's a real gravestone, and this is where she is." Well, it's gone so bad now. Someone's put 2 British flags there. Now there's British soldiers buried there. And so there's no burial there. This homestead there isn't even related to the family. We now know where the homestead was. We know where she was buried. However, she was moved. I have spoke with a descendant who unfortunately has passed. Her and her husband are now no longer with us. And we went out and saw the cemetery where her brothers are. They all had diphtheria around that time period. You're talking the late 1800s, 1880s. And there is about 5-6 graves out there. It would be nice to be able to do GPR, but again, you're talking 400 yards into the woods. It's not an easy trek, but it is a fun one.
Lot.
Yeah, and it's something that I've never revealed to people where it is, because as much as I've researched it, I've done it for so long now, it almost feels like a part of me. And I protect it. I'm very passionate about that site. So I've only told a smattering of people, and those are people I highly trust, and that's it.
Yeah, that's a great. And Sarah, what do you got for us?
I think, rather than a particular grave or situation, it's kind of even drawing back to what Ruthie was talking about. I think for me, it was many years ago now when I realized, I guess I just always thought about gravestones and cemeteries, as kind of permanent fixtures, things that were always there. But, as an archaeologist and an historian over time, especially doing cultural resource management projects, and looking at land use history and things like that, you realize that over the years, particularly in the 19th century, mid to late 19th century, when a lot of, big projects are happening in terms of infrastructure and things like, canals, railroads, roads, municipal buildings, all of this stuff, that a lot of people decided that old cemeteries, old burial grounds in their towns were in the way. And many times they decided that they wanted that land for other purposes. So what they would do is either remove the gravestones and just build on top of the land, or through it sometimes, depending on what it was, leaving the bodies in place, many of which were disturbed, and some of them are still there unmarked. Or you'd have situations where they might put an ad in the paper saying, we're relocating the burial ground. You've got 2 weeks to come get your ancestors out, if you want to, and if not, we're just going to dig them up. And sometimes there would be more kind of directed efforts to relocate an entire cemetery, but they never got everybody. And sometimes they would just move the stones, and sometimes stones got buried. But you see all the time, and there are places all over the state and everywhere else where, Waterbury Library Park, right, that used to be a cemetery. And whenever they do work there, bone fragments and stones and things like that pop up because they didn't get everybody out. In New London, there's a school on the site of the third burial ground, and over the years, several times, bones and burials have come out of those. And it's just this idea that, in many times in places, they weren't considered things that were sacred. They were just sort of in the way of progress. And I think that, we're moving back towards a time where we have a more of a reverence for that history. And people are much more interested now than they were at some other points in history in preserving those memories, which I think is great. But it's really kind of jarring. And most of the calls that I get involving human remains are oftentimes these types of situations.
Right.
Plus, there are just all the little cemeteries that were lost.
Yeah, well, there's still a law that, again, goes totally unrecognized, that even if you're working in a cemetery and you uncover bones,
I like that.
that you are to notify the state archaeologist. And the reason for that is just to simply report it, to make sure that murdered bodies weren't buried, because the state archaeologist is supposed to be able to come out and say, oh yeah, that was something that was buried 100 years ago, not 2 years ago. But nobody ever reports these things. Nobody ever pays attention to this stuff. It's really sad.
One last story?
Yep, Glenda.
I just have a quick one. It was actually a family mystery. One of my great uncles died in the 70s, and his brother had the stone made, and no one saw it until the brother died. And we went to the cemetery, and my great uncle's name was John Burton, and his brother had carved on the stone "son of Sam Hayes," so which was his uncle. So we're thinking, I don't know if I can ever figure it out, but he might have been the illegitimate son of his uncle. So these stones can open up a mystery.
Yeah,
as well.
that's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, when's the sequel to this episode, Sarah? hey, Sarah, as we're winding down, I feel it's kind of important to kind of thank Ruth and Michael for their work, and do so by asking you a question as the state archaeologist. You've done programs where you've had specialists in underwater archaeology that have put out on our air cries for help, asking citizen scientists and explorers to share any of their findings. Well, you've done great programs with metal detectorists and kind of locked in, their role and how it's a symbiotic kind of relationship that you have, and a good and productive working relationship with many of them. Where does the hard work and the passion that has been around our round table for the last hour, where does that fit into helping you do what you do?
I think that the work that Ruthie and Michael do is incredibly important because, as she mentioned in the beginning, there's just not the State Historic Preservation Office, the state archaeologists, we both wear so many different hats, and this is an important part of our history that sometimes gets forgotten and left behind. And the work that they do and the educational programming that they do, helping people in different communities to help protect and preserve their own cemeteries, is hugely important too, because one, it keeps them around longer. It preserves that information so people can learn about their families and their history. But also, in many ways, it takes a huge burden off of our offices because they're, kind of preempting some of the problems that might come up later by getting in there and doing some of this preservation work. But I can't, stress enough how hard they work and how they're not supported really in any way, shape, or form. They do this out of passion and a desire, to save this history. And I can't thank them enough for the work that they do.
Have to make sure while we have time, we have to make sure, because I know that there are a lot of people that are going to want to jot down. So let's take some time and go into details on how people can find, follow, be a part of what resources are available to them.
As far as Connecticut Gravestone Network, like I said, we've been kind of silent. I'm trying to get busy. If you go to my website, I have changes I wish to make, but at least I do have a bunch of my handouts that I used to use for programs that will help, give people better information to go by. Again, just be patient with me because now everything feeds back to a singular email address. But you can go to ConnecticutGravestoneNetwork.org. Okay, and you'll be able to find those handouts. You'll find some general information. You can get to me, and hopefully we will be advertising a couple of workshops in East Hartford for next month, second Saturdays all the way through to October. I work for Stanley Whitman Museum in Farmington doing workshops with them. So that's two places that you might want to deal with. And we're going to have a meetup in Middlefield July 24th. And hopefully that will all be advertised pretty soon. Mike.
And then for us, Rediscovering History. So if you're on the internet, it's rediscovering-history.com. Like Ruthie, I want to get our website, it is going, but I want to get it more updated. It takes a little bit, of course. The biggest thing, I know Ruthie said she's not a social butterfly. We are Facebook. Rediscovering History, both on a nonprofit page and on a group page. Our group page has been exploding. We put all the pictures on there. And it's not just us sharing from our point of view. We allow people to come in and talk to us and say, hey, I have this information. I want to, educate people. Okay, go ahead. And so we're kind of trying to build a community versus just our viewpoint being prominent.
And if you want to get in touch with the Friends group, it's fosa-ct.org. Or you can follow us on Facebook, Friends of the Office of State Archaeology, Connecticut. Sorry, that was a mouthful today.
And Sarah, do you have enough time for people to send you emails and stuff?
Sure. Everybody can send me emails. Like Ruthie, I will answer them as soon as I can. But the website for the Office of State Archaeology is osa.uconn.edu, and we also have a Facebook page that you can follow some of our activities.
Yeah, another thing you need to remember, like Mike and I don't have staff. We are what we do. So is Sarah. She doesn't really have staff either. So just the Friends group helps her.
Like even on the way here, I was getting 10, 15 emails. Be a little patient. I can't respond back. I need a 72-hour day, not a 24-hour day.
Yeah.
We're going to have to bring these guys back for the Halloween show, Sarah.
That's what I was thinking. Thanks, everybody.
That's a good
Thank you,
idea,
Mike.
yeah.
Thank you, Ruthie.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks so much.